Chapter 1: Introduction of Allan. Allan was an ordinary 18-year-old boy who had just graduated from high school. He lived in a small town where everyone knew each other, and it seemed like the entire world was limited to his street and a few familiar faces. His life was predictable, but he always dreamed of something more. Every morning, Allan would wake up to the familiar sounds of his small town. The birds chirped in the trees outside his window, and the distant hum of the morning traffic served as a reminder of the day ahead. His room was filled with posters of far-off places, cities he had only seen in movies and read about in books. He longed to leave his mark on the world, to experience life beyond the confines of his hometown. Allan often spent evenings sitting in his room, dreaming about his future life in a big city where no one would know his past. He craved new experiences and acquaintances. One day, while browsing the internet, he came across a forum where people shared their stories and looked for new friends. He found solace in the anonymity the internet provided. Here, he could be anyone, share his thoughts and dreams without fear of judgment. It was on one of these forums that he first encountered Alex, a user whose post resonated with him deeply. Alex wrote about the same aspirations and fears that Allan harbored. Their conversations started with simple comments on each other's posts, but soon grew into lengthy private messages. Chapter 2: Life in a Small Town. The small town where Allan lived was a place where everyone knew everything about everyone. People had lived there for generations, and changes were rare. The society was conservative, and any deviations from the norm caused a lot of gossip. Allan felt like an outsider in this world. He couldn't openly talk about his feelings and preferences. Adults wouldn't understand, and his peers might start teasing him. The town had a way of magnifying every little detail of one's life, and Allan's quiet nature made him an easy target for rumors and speculations. So the internet became the only place where he could be himself without fear of judgment. Allan's parents were supportive but traditional. They loved him dearly but often struggled to understand his dreams and aspirations. His father, a mechanic, hoped Allan would join the family business, while his mother, a school teacher, encouraged him to pursue a more conventional path in education. On weekends, the family would attend the local church, a place that represented both community and confinement for Allan. The sermons often touched on themes that made Allan feel even more alienated. He found himself questioning his place in this tight-knit society. Chapter 3: Online Communication. On the forum where Allan spent a lot of time, he met a person named Alex. Alex seemed like the perfect interlocutor: smart, interesting, understanding. They started chatting every day, discussing everything from favorite movies to deep philosophical questions. Their conversations were a breath of fresh air for Allan. He felt a connection he had never experienced before. Alex had a way of making him feel heard and understood. They talked about their dreams, fears, and everything in between. Allan found himself looking forward to their chats, often staying up late just to continue their conversations. Alex shared stories about his life in a big city, his adventures, and the vibrant culture he was a part of. He spoke about art galleries, concerts, and the diverse people he met daily. Allan was mesmerized by these tales, picturing himself walking through bustling streets and exploring new horizons. Chapter 4: Deep Communication. With each passing day, their communication became more personal. Allan shared his innermost thoughts and experiences that he couldn't tell anyone he knew. Alex supported him, gave advice, and always seemed to understand what Allan was feeling. They talked about the future, about how they could meet and spend time together. Allan began to make plans, imagining how his life would change after this meeting. He saw in Alex not only a friend, but possibly something more. Their conversations often drifted into the realm of possibility, where they would discuss potential futures together, free from the constraints of their current lives. Allan found himself thinking about Alex throughout the day. Every notification on his phone brought a rush of excitement. He would read and reread their messages, cherishing each word. Alex became a beacon of hope, a symbol of the life Allan yearned for. Chapter 5: Plans to Meet. After several months of communication, Allan and Alex decided it was time to meet. Alex offered to come to the town where Allan lived. He said he wanted to see all the places Allan talked about and get to know his world. Allan was over the moon with happiness. He began to prepare for the meeting, imagining how everything would be perfect. He told only his best friend, Jake, about this, who supported him and was happy for him. Jake and Allan had been friends since childhood. They shared everything, and Jake was the only person in town who knew about Allan's true feelings. Jake had always been supportive and non-judgmental, making him the perfect confidant. When Allan told him about Alex, Jake was excited but also cautious, warning Allan to be careful. Chapter 6: Preparing for the meeting. The day of the meeting was approaching, and Allan felt a mix of excitement and fear. He wanted everything to go perfectly, and for Alex to see him as the person he knew from their conversations. Allan carefully chose his clothes, thinking about the impression he wanted to make. He selected his favorite shirt, the one that made him feel confident, and tried on several outfits before settling on the perfect combination. He thought about the places they could visit, planning a small tour of his town. He wanted to show Alex the hidden gems, the spots that held special meaning for him. He imagined how they would walk around his town, laugh, talk, and make plans for the future. An ideal picture was painted in his head, and he couldn't wait for it to become reality. The night before the meeting, Allan barely slept. He tossed and turned, replaying their conversations in his mind and picturing the moment they would finally meet. His heart raced with anticipation and a hint of nervousness. He wondered if Alex was feeling the same way. Chapter 7: First Impression. The day of the meeting arrived. Allan stood at the train station, waiting for the train to arrive. His heart was pounding in his chest, and each minute of waiting became more unbearable. The station was bustling with people, but Allan felt like he was in a world of his own. Finally, the train arrived, and Allan began to look for the familiar face. He had memorized every detail of Alex's photos, every feature, every smile. But when Alex approached him, Allan was stunned. Standing before him was a man much older and heavier than he had imagined. All his fantasies and expectations collapsed in an instant. Alex looked nothing like the photos he had sent. The initial shock quickly turned into disappointment. Allan tried to hide his emotions and find common topics for conversation, but everything seemed different from what he had imagined. Alex tried to be friendly and open, but Allan felt betrayed and deceived. Chapter 8: Disappointment. The initial shock quickly turned into disappointment. Allan tried to hide his emotions and find common topics for conversation, but everything seemed different from what he had imagined. Alex tried to be friendly and open, but Allan felt betrayed and deceived. They spent a few hours together, but the conversation didn't flow. Allan felt that each moment of this meeting only deepened his disappointment. He wanted to leave, to run away, but felt he had to be polite and endure until the end. Alex sensed Allan's discomfort and tried to salvage the situation by sharing more about his life, but it only made Allan feel more disconnected. The man standing before him was not the Alex he had imagined and grown to care for. The realization hit him hard, and he struggled to keep his composure. Chapter 9: The Conversation. During the conversation, Allan tried to understand why Alex had deceived him. Alex explained that he didn't want to disappoint him and feared that if Allan knew the truth, he would stop talking to him. But Allan felt that his trust had been undermined. They tried to find common topics, but everything seemed strained and unnatural. Allan realized that his feelings were an illusion, created based on lies and deceived expectations. He no longer wanted to continue this meeting and decided he needed a break. "I thought we had something real," Allan said, his voice trembling. "But now, I don't even know who you are." Alex looked down, unable to meet Allan's eyes. "I'm sorry, Allan. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you the truth." Allan shook his head, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. "I need some time to think," he said finally. "I need to figure out what I want." Chapter 10: Allan's Decision. Returning home, Allan felt empty. He realized that he had rushed and trusted a person he barely knew. He decided that he needed to spend more time on himself and his development, rather than looking for quick solutions to his personal life. He started to devote more time to his studies, his hobbies, and planning his future. Allan understood that he needed to become stronger and more confident before trying to build a relationship again. He decided that he wouldn't rush and would try to understand himself first. The days turned into weeks, and Allan found solace in his routine. He reconnected with his old hobbies, like painting and writing, which he had neglected in his pursuit of a relationship. He also focused on his studies, determined.